Good evening, everybody. Hope we are doing very well and welcome back to the channel where today's video we're going to be looking at Game Week 31, doing a bit of a preview of the fixtures, the players and possible captaincy options. Hope everyone had a great Easter break which coincided with week 30. Some interesting results and surprise is along the way, shall we say, which we'll discuss as we go through the fixtures. Before we get into it, I just want to say thank you for the support so far. Any subscription, like, even review on any of the videos are really appreciated at this point. And as you can see on the screen now, please follow us on other socials. I'm more than happy to give any support on whatever platform you like. We stream on Twitch and also you can contact me on Twitter if you need any help, or of course just comment below with any help you need. So let's get into it. So I've got a normal game week, like we like to say, with 10 fixtures this week. I feel in general these fixtures are a lot harder to predict than game week 30 was. There's some quite obvious fixtures in game week 30 we could target. There's going to be quite a lot of top games and difficult ones to predict, I think. Especially when I'm looking at defenders for this week, I'm a bit undecided, especially because of Chelsea's result in the last fixture. We kind of had them down as a banker to basically get some clean sheets in like the next 5 or so weeks, but that's been cast into some doubt after that 5-2 loss to West Brom. But we'll skip through the fixtures and give a bit of an overview. I'd also like to point out as well, I'm recording this just as the Champions League lineups have come out for the Man City and the Liverpool game, just to give us a bit of insight on, we'll try to pre-guess Pep Roulette. We know it won't go well, but we'll try with that. And I was also interested to see who started in Liverpool's front line. But when we get down to that fixture, we'll discuss that as well. So if we look at the first fixture, Fulham against Wolves. This is, like I said, there's quite a few tight fixtures this week. I'm not particularly wanting to target this fixture in a great level, but I would make a point about Wolves that they've got a great fixture run. I'll refer you to the video down in the description below as well, where we looked at the fixtures from now to the end of the season, and you will see highlighted on that video Wolves fixtures are very good for like about the next 5 weeks, starting with this Fulham game. So if you're wanting to put a player or two in for this week, or if you're on your wildcard, if you want to put Wolves players in, I have no issue you doing that in the about 5 weeks or in the short term, especially if you're wildcarding. You might as well bring them in now and have them in for the rest of the season. So if you was doing that, the obvious option would be a Neto, and then you might want to go for a defender, depends. I'm not convinced by them defensively, but they might squeeze a clean sheet somewhere. So probably Cody would be your best option. I would have said Bolly, but Bolly didn't play yesterday either, so that's put a bit of doubt there. But I do like Fulham as a team, to be fair. They're always ones that will give you a tight game. Now, they were quite unlucky against Villa the last game. You can always bet on this being like a 1-1 or a 2-1. That's why I'm not a big fan of the fixture this week, but if you're getting a Wolves asset in for the next few weeks, that won't be a bad investment. As I mentioned about wildcarding as well, we're going to do another video this week where I'm just going to put a bit of a wildcard draft together, which will be a good tool as well, because even if you're not on a wildcard, it's got a lot of picks in there that you can use going forward the next few weeks and then hopefully help with your transfers as well. So make sure you check that one out. This video will be out on Tuesday night, and I expect the wildcard will be out on Wednesday. Right, so as I said, I'm not particularly, unless you go long term with Wolves, don't particularly target that fixture. So then we go to Man City Leeds, which again is difficult to predict. There's going to be quite a few of these fixtures going down that it's going to depend on the team they play. For example, Man City love a bit of Pep Roulette and how they're prioritising Europe. So from Man City's lineup for the Champions League, they are basically got their full, like, best lineup, I would say, out. So they've got Stones, Diaz, Cancelo in defence, Gundogan, KDB, and then Mahrez and Foden all starting in the Champions League. So that straight away puts slight doubt in my mind about those playing the Leeds game. The obvious one at centre back is for me that Laporte seems. I expect Laporte to play a lot of the league games, so that means Stones or Diaz will get rotated out. Using the logic, not that Pep has any logic, Diaz played the last game and Stones was rested. So I would not be surprised if Stones and Laporte played that Leeds game, but I could be completely wrong with that. It's just trying to guess the pepper roulette. And the fact that Cancelo's playing, they could also be resting Cancelo, because they could easily bring like a Zinchenko in there or a Mendy back in, because they've got Kyle Walker at right back for this fixture as well. So there's just a lot of risk around the City assets, especially Gundogan and KDB playing as well. I think they'll be the most used options in midfield. I'm not fully convinced by City assets at the minute. So keep one or two in your team if you need to, but if I was on a wild card, I might have one in there. I would not have more than one. There's just too much risk in there for me. Like Diaz is probably a most nailed person, but like I said this week, I'm not convinced he is even nailed. So it's not particularly a fixture I want you to target again, but having one or two players, you're just risking with rotation, so it's not worth the risk. You may better off just, like for example, getting like a Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw's not probably the best example, but you need like a definite starter. Let me think of a definite starter. For example, like a Cresswell at West Ham, you know he's going to play every game unless he's injured, compared to like a Cancelo who you're not guaranteed to play. You're taking that risk that Cancelo has got a potentially higher ceiling, but is he actually going to play? So it depends, especially if you're not on a wild card, you probably want to go for the safer option. If you're on a wild card, there's no issue having a couple of punts out there, but the most sensible thing would be to stick with players that are guaranteed to play. That gives you a bit of difficulty with Leeds, because I feel like a lot of players will have 2 or 3 Leeds players in their team already, and they've not got a very good run going forward. So getting rid of Leeds on a wildcard is a really good idea. But for the others of us, like myself, we're going to have to ride out with like a Rafinha or a Bamford. And you no issue particularly playing them in these running games, because they can always pop up with a goal. I wouldn't be playing like a Dallas or someone probably in these fixtures, because we're unlikely to get a clean sheet, which will be half of Dallas's returns. So like I said, a lot of these fixtures are quite difficult down here. I'd back Man City to win, but I've got no guarantee of who will actually play. So it's very difficult to actually pick the player who's going to get you the points. Then we move down to Liverpool versus Villa. I expect Liverpool, even though they're in Champions League, to not rotate their team as much as the City would. I've checked the lineup today, and Jota is playing instead of Firmino. So they're playing Salah, Mane and Jota up front. You're going to get a bit of rotation between that front three, and I don't think you'd be picking any of the midfielders anyway. So you've got a slight risk if you're choosing one of their forwards that they might not start the game, but you've seen a good example in the last week when Jota came off the bench. He's still dangerous. We've seen Salah do it earlier in the season where he's come off the bench and scored twice. So even if you go for an attacker, you've got a solid attack, like a solid option there, even if they come off the bench. I think a lot of people are going to be jumping on the Jota bandwagon, because if you're comparing him and Salah at the minute, you could still argue Salah's the better option, but for the price, a lot of people are just going to jump on Jota, because you may as well, because then you've got a bit of Liverpool coverage either way. So I won't be surprised if a lot of people, I'd say Jota is top of the list, then Salah, and then probably Trent would be the top 3 that people are going to be bringing in. And Liverpool, I think I've got one of the easiest runs for the rest of the season. They've got Villa, which is semi-difficult. They've got United in a few weeks, but between those and after that, they've got one of the best runs for the rest of the season. I'd fully back them to get top 4, but based on their fixtures alone, they'll have competition from Chelsea and West Ham, but their fixtures are so much easier than the other two. They expect them to push on, which they probably just need to do to try and guarantee that Champions League football, because it's not going to be guaranteed from the Champions League. Because, they could easily win it, but it's not guaranteed. And Villa, I feel like Villa are decently done. Well, they're decent in defence. Without Grealish going forward, they can be very hit and miss. They did slightly better in Fulham in the last game against Fulham, but I'm not particularly jumping on their attack anytime soon. And their defence for this fixture, I wouldn't particularly be. If you've got Martinez, you might want to play him in goal because he might get some save points, but I wouldn't be bringing in defenders in. Saying that, because their defence is pretty solid, I wouldn't expect Liverpool to particularly run away with this game. I'd say like a 2-0 maybe. So it is good to get like a Jota or Salah in there. But I wouldn't say this week it's essential to get them in. The fixtures from next week get a lot better, as I mentioned. So if you need to leave it for another week to get your Liverpool assets in, that's not a bad option. But then you also have to think about who you're going to captain in this game week. So you might think your Liverpool asset would be a good captaincy option, as we'll mention later on. So move on to Palace and Chelsea. As I was mentioning about Chelsea, a lot of people even tripled up on their defence, expecting them to get a clean sheet against West Brom, and then the total opposite happened. So I probably would have been recommending last week you get a double Chelsea defence, but now we're a lot less confident on that. So Thiago Silva came back, going to be suspended straight away. And I saw Kepa and Rudiger had a bit of a spat this week in training, so I've got a bit of hesitation about Rudiger potentially being in there. So I'd expect Aspi, Christensen, and maybe Zuma to be your centre backs, which probably there isn't a lot of, especially for this fixture, there's not going to be a lot of rotation. But again, you might want to check the lineup for Chelsea tomorrow night to see who's playing in that game, because if they're playing in that game, they might not play in the league fixture. Like I said, with the European rotation, you've got to be careful. That's why I don't mind you having West Ham and Leeds assets in your team, for example, because they've not got European commitments, and it's quite likely they're always going to play unless they get an injury. Not like my example of Cresswell earlier. So you've got the issue with the rotation, so sometimes you just need those dead set starters. So for Chelsea, I've no issue having a defender or even a goalkeeper in there. But I think triple up might be a bit too far. You just go in for it in this high risk, high reward. It could totally backfire like it did against West Brom, but then they could easily keep a clean sheet in the next few games and pay it back. Like Palace, I don't see as being a big threat, so I'd say the defence is the most obvious option to go for here. Palace aren't too bad at home. Chelsea might get a few, 2 or 3 goals, but I'm not convinced by Chelsea's attack. You might do a punt on a Havertz or a Mount, but there's a lot better options you can go for in attack. So again, defence for Chelsea, but not much further than that. I'll be going with Chelsea. At Burnley Newcastle, the next fixture, I don't see any value as an FPL fixture this really. If you've got Chris Wood or someone up front, fair play. I wouldn't be bringing him in, but for this fixture, you may as well keep him in. I was eyeing up like Callum Wilson for when he came back, but Newcastle's fixtures after this game are pretty atrocious. So I've been totally put off that idea. If you just want a cheap defender from a Burnley or Newcastle and you've got them in there, I wouldn't take them out, but definitely don't target that fixture at all. So we'll just quickly move on because that's not much value in that fixture. West Ham against Leicester, which I think will be a very tight game. I think this is a very important game for both teams. It's currently 4th against 3rd, which I'm not a lot. I think at this stage of the season, if we was looking back at the start of the season, a lot of people wouldn't have been expecting us to say that. But I expect it to be a really tight game because there's a lot to play for in this fixture. So I expect a lot of people to have these assets, but this game week, if you're looking, I know a lot of people looking at Iheanacho or Vardy, even Maddison coming back to fitness, even a Leicester defender. I'm not sure this fixture is the one to be bringing in your Leicester assets. They, along with Wolves, have a great run for Leicester, after this fixture, they've got a great run. If you refer to the video in the description again, after this West Ham fixture. So this could be one way to just hold off for a week. If you've got a better option who you're going to be subbing out, transferring out, you may as well just keep them for this one game week and then get one of those options in next week. They could get a goal or 2 against West Ham, but I expect it to be a tight game. Well, saying that, West Ham have had a 3-3 and a 3-2 in the last few games, so it could go anyway, but I expect it to be quite tight and tense this game. So it's similar with West Ham as well. There's not a huge value in their assets for this game week, but these are one of the teams that I've just got like a set and forget in my team. Well, until Antonio got injured, I was just going to keep treble West Ham in my team for the rest of the season because you know those players are going to start. Very similar with Leeds. So this is one of the weeks where you're probably just going to have to try and get through it. You might want to play a Cresswell, hoping he might scrape a clean sheet or gets an assist. But you don't want to be investing in those assets for this game week. You just have to ride through it if you're not on a wild card. And like I am, I'm not on a wild card, so I'm just going to have to probably play 1 or 2 of them and maybe bench 1 or 2 as well. Just optimising the options you've got for these particularly more difficult fixtures compared to last week, I'd say. So talking about tight fixtures, I'd expect the Spurs Man United game to also be a tough fixture if I can get it out there. So I expect a lot of people to be quite heavy on Spurs. Well, I'm expecting to have Kane and then maybe Son or Bale. The key point on that is because next game week, in game week 32, they've got a double game week. So it's not an attractive fixture for Spurs this week, but if you're looking for the future and you're looking to get a transfer in for that next game week, I've no issue with that. You might even want to bench them this week. You might bring them in and still bench them, just so you've got that option there for next week. But I don't expect it to be a 6-1 as it was at Old Trafford, because that was a freak result because of some ridiculous sending off. But it wouldn't surprise me if Spurs actually won that game, because United aren't particularly solid at the minute, in my opinion. But I could see it easily being like a 2-2 game. There might be a few goals. I wouldn't be betting on defence in this game. But you may as well, if you've got Kane and Bruno, you need to play them anyway, because they're still quite likely to get points. And I could even make the argument of starting, if you've got a Bale or Son as well, just go for it. Go all out attack. I think this game week, as I mentioned, the clean sheets are quite difficult to predict. Apart from maybe Chelsea, you might get Man City or Liverpool, but you've got a bit of doubt, especially around City, who actually is going to play in defence. So it's quite hard to predict clean sheets this week. So you might just go all out attack. That's what I think I might do, especially for that Spurs Man United player. Just play all your attacking assets and see what happens. Because there's a lot of tight games. But it should be, hopefully it's an exciting game. You always see between the bigger sides, it gets hyped up and then it's not really as exciting as it could be. But like we've seen with the West Ham games the last few weeks, hopefully it'll be exciting. So, like for example, a Luke Shaw, I would not be confident in playing Luke Shaw in this fixture just because he's playing against Kane. Spurs don't look convincing, but you always know Kane can get a goal. So if you've got a better option on your bench, I'd probably not be playing Shaw in this fixture. But he's a good option going forward, so I wouldn't be transferring him out. So we move on to Sheffield United, Arsenal. When I was looking at Arsenal's run of fixtures, and Arsenal's run of fixtures are really good. But then we have the rotation problem with Europe, because it's quite clear, I think, from Arteta's lineups that it's preferring the Europa League to play his best players, and fair play to him, because he's got a lot better chance of getting Champions League through the Europa than he has through the league. It's basically gone in the league now that lost Liverpool. So it's a very difficult to predict an Arsenal asset, similar to City. If you want to put a cheap asset like a Saka in there, but he's a bit of a doubt with injury at the minute, or even a cheap defender like a Rob Holding, no issue with that, but you've got the chance of rotation again there, so don't bank on them always being a starter, but with them being a cheap option, you may as well just have them in your team just to enable other players in the team, especially if you're on a wild card. Like a Rob Holding would be a good enabler for another position to save up some funds. But yeah, even Saka's pretty cheap at about 5. I think it's about 5.3, 5.5, somewhere between there. So they're good enablers, but I wouldn't be full on attacking Arsenal unless they get knocked out of the Europa League, and then you've got a bit more certainty you'll actually play. So then if I move to West Brom Southampton, I was going to say, this is a good fixture for Southampton, and then I've had flashbacks, 5-2, 5-2. And I wonder if this West Brom have just been let off the shackles a bit now, and I just need to go for it, because they're basically relegated. They've got to win games if they're going to stay up. So I can see this being a high-scoring game again, to be fair. If you've got Southampton attacking assets, this is a good fixture to, well, even a differential captain option here. If you've got a Danny Ings, I like the look of like a Walcott or a Redmond at the minute, depending on if they'll start or not. Walcott looked pretty decent in the last fixture that came back against Burnley. Even a cheap West Brom option of Pereira at the minute is... Pereira just keeps having these patches where he scored 2 goals in a game and then he won't do anything for 5 games. So if you get the right game, then fine. It's not particularly a bad fixture for West Brom. Based on the last few weeks, I'm hoping it'll be a good game again, like a 2-2 or something. So this is where I get the difficulty, where I'm trying to recommend some defenders, And I think a lot of these games could be quite high scoring, and I feel like a lot of teams are getting a bit fatigued, and kind of the effort of playing these fixtures in lockdowns kind of getting to people, especially without the fans. Some people, or some of the players probably aren't given as much effort for the 90 minutes, so it leads to a bit of sloppiness and can create more chances for the opposition. So, probably, again, attacking options, all out attack this week. I'm definitely not going to be playing more than 3 defenders. I'm just going to be going all out attack. There isn't a lot of value in your defence this week. So then similar with Brighton and Everton, I could easily see it as being like a 1-1, which will ruin any defensive points. So you've got the like Brighton, except for when they had the blank game week a few game weeks ago, I don't see much value in Brighton options. So if you're on a wildcard, I'd be getting rid of all your Brighton options. If you've still got one like a Trossard or a defender in there, it's like Everton's not the worst fixture, so you could play them if you see them as a better option. Like if you want to be benching like a Shaw or something, and you fancy Brighton to keep a clean sheet against Everton better than United against Spurs, go for it. But there's not a huge amount of value in that fixture. Again, like I said, a lot of these fixtures, at least half of these fixtures, I expect like to be a 1-1 or a pretty tight game. So there's not going to be a lot of points either way. They might scrape the odd clean sheet, but they're pretty difficult fixtures to predict. So when I'm trying to give recommendations, it's quite hard to like I've said, if it's high scoring, the attacking assets are going to be outperforming the defensive ones. We've seen a lot this season where the defenders have done very well, and it might be famous last words, but I can see a limited amount of defender points this week. As I mentioned, I think those Saturday fixtures you see there, Man City, Liverpool and Chelsea, probably your best for defence. A lot of the other games, I'm hoping it's all out attack and everyone just goes for it. But we'll see how that plays out. So then if, as I just slightly mentioned, if I was looking at captains this week, you've got the risk of going for a Man City asset, which is again high risk, high reward. Make sure you've got a very good vice captain if you want to do that. I think a lot of people will be going with a Liverpool, depending on how their Champions League fixture goes. Salah, I would be very surprised if Salah wasn't the highest captain option here. A lot of people will go for Jota as well. And then a Chelsea defender will probably be up there. People bet a lot on Alonso in the last fixture. I can see a lot of people going for Alonso again. But I think this, after last week, you can see how badly a defensive pick as captain can go. So I'd probably recommend you going for one of those Liverpool attackers. And if you're not convinced by Liverpool, then you might as well just stick it on a Kane or a Bruno if you just whoever you back in that fixture. Obviously, it's not ideal to play each other, but I think you'd always back one of those to get a goal over some of the other ones. Like as I mentioned, if you want to go for a differential captain, you've got someone like Danny Ings in there, fair play. But if you just go for a safer option, I think your Kane or your Bruno, some of them would say a set and forget option for most of the season. If you left the captaincy on Bruno most of the season, you wouldn't have gone far wrong anyway. But yeah, I think that Liverpool fixture would be the one that appeals to me at this point in time. Not that I've got a Liverpool asset, but it still appeals to me. So that's what I'd be recommending, guys. So I think that rounds up the video for today. As I mentioned, if you've got any questions about your team, you're more than welcome to link it to me on Twitter or mention any transfers you're looking to do in the comments or on Twitter again. Also live stream on Twitch, so jump into one of those streams sometime and just ask me a question as well. I'm more than happy to help. As mentioned before, any support on the videos is much appreciated. And we will have my wildcard draft coming tomorrow, and we will... Oh, and also refer back to the fixtures video we did last week, which is quite a good tool, especially if you're wildcarded. It gives you a breakdown of the fixtures. We did it from last week, so game week 30 all the way till the end of the season. So we had it listed the best 10 teams, like ranked by how good their fixtures were. So especially if you're building a wildcard, that is a very useful tool, even for your transfers on a week by week basis. That'll be a really good tool. So thanks again for listening to this video, and I will see you again next time. Have a good evening.